Hi, everyone. Welcome. You're in a Dance New Jersey connection call. We'll get started in just a minute and give everyone a few minutes to pop in. What do you think? Get started? Yeah, everyone's ready. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a Dance Education Dance New Jersey connection call. Today, we are very excited. We will have our very recent, as of last week, dance education graduates from Rutgers University. Yes, big claps all around. Today, they'll be guiding us through a website resource that they've created as part of a course that is led by part-time lecturers Emily Funicello and Becky Vizentiner. It is called Kinetic Connection. It's a website resource that takes the social justice standards and blends them into dance lessons organized by grade band and by social justice standard. We are really thrilled to be making this connection today and providing a resource for dance educators and a platform for new presenters, right? To hit the dance world, the dance scene running. I'm wearing my shirt to help you out. I teach dance. What's your superpower? To give you some motivation and get going. So I will turn it over to the Rutgers Dance Education graduates.
Thank you, Meg. So hi and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Emily Funicello and I'm a middle school dance educator with Trenton Public Schools.
And I'm Becky Vizentiner. I am a high school dance educator with North Plainfield School District.
And we co-teach the course Students, Communities, and Social Justice, Kinetic Connections at Rutgers University.
So this course takes place during the final semester of the students' graduate year and provides them with the opportunity to apply all of their knowledge, tools, skills, and experiences into implementing a community-based dance program. Emily and I serve as mentors as the students explore their own identities as teachers without a cooperating teacher prior to entering the field on their own.
So some of the guiding questions that we have throughout our course are: what is social justice? How do dance and social justice intersect? And what does that look like at various age levels? What is community? What role does the community play within a child's education? And how can educators serve the community?
Typically, students in this course collaborate in pairs to design a 10-week program, which is then implemented in an after-school program for a local elementary school. And this after-school dance program seeks to increase the availability of dance to students while also integrating social justice and wellness themes. So this year, as we all know, we had a shift into a virtual format. So we examined how this course needed to be adapted based on the current circumstances to meet the needs of the graduating students and also educators in the state. So we made some adjustments. We expanded our definition of community. So we redefined our definition to include dance educators and their students from across the state. And this is where the partnership with Dance New Jersey blossomed. We created mini units for the virtual landscape in order to better serve New Jersey dance educators. We wanted to ensure that these unit plans were relevant for this virtual time period, while also making considerations about how it could be adapted in the future when we are back in-person learning. And integrating non-Western and underrepresented dance styles, both challenging and empowering educators to make the uncomfortable comfortable.
So our recent graduates used a co-teaching model, and they were tasked with designing and creating content for a 4-lesson mini unit. These virtual mini units were compiled into a Google site, along with a few other resources to support dance educators with implementing social justice and social emotional learning into their pedagogy. So this Google site was shared with you through Dance New Jersey. We'll also share the links today. And I'm going to turn it over to our presenters to dive a little bit deeper into their unit plans.
Sarah, you're muted.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Jillian. So sorry. Started off great. All right. So hi, everyone. I hope you're feeling fantastic with the warm weather outside and summer coming around the corner. But first, I wanted to give us a formal introduction to all of the cohorts' names and who we are. So if you guys should just give a little hello, so that way it's easier to find everyone. My name is Sarah Rivera. Deja Barrett. Let's give a little wave. Brianna Brathwaite. Christina Kong, Laura De La Garza Noble, Rebecca Pavelko, Jillian Papino, Claudia Soga, Kara Stein, and last but definitely not least is Abigail Wolski. So as Becky and Emily have stated, during our semester in our Social Justice Kinetic Connections course, we work deeply in both non-Westernized and underrepresented dance forms, focusing on specifically social justice standards in order to create these mini units. So it's important to note that social justice standards are to be presented in our daily objectives as educators the same way we use New Jersey and national dance standards.
The goal is to continue discussions surrounding identity, diversity, justice, and action in our daily teaching practices. As pictured on the slide, we had put together all of our standards in a cycle, and this is to show the fluidity amongst our lessons. So we want to really work to combine social justice in our everyday teaching schedule and not to make it separated from our objectives for the day. So whether you are teaching in a school or a studio, it is possible to incorporate social justice seamlessly into your lessons, and throughout this presentation, you will get to see how. So I'm going to click the link, and Sarah's going to share it into the chat where you can access our unit. So I'm going to click the link so we can see. And Sarah put it in the chat for me. So you are presented our homepage, and to the left, you can see grades K through 12, 3 through 5th grade, middle school, and 2 high school lessons. You can click on the lessons, and it will talk a bit about our lessons, and then as well as a little bit about who created them and resources. Sarah, if you want to mention anything else.
Yeah, and then Claudia, if you scroll down just a little bit, each lesson is actually hyperlinked. If you scroll up one more, no, scroll up. Right there. So each lesson is actually hyperlinked, and you can open it up and it'll bring you to a full-blown lesson plan, along with videos that support the lesson, also describing a bit about the lesson and even teaching the lesson too, and as well as some assessments too. And that goes for each grade level. Each one has 4 lessons embedded into that site. Yeah, and then Claude, if you want to just explain that feedback part at the end.
Sure. So at the bottom, we have a section on to the left at the bottom here, and you can provide us with feedback as new dance educators, and as well as when we are nice and established in our schools. We want to continue to build on our teaching practices, and you can do this and help us strengthen our lessons in our feedback section, and then we would be able to get that information and move forward with it. Let me go back.
I'm also just going to drop for all of you the social justice standards into the chat. Those are for your use, and you can browse them either right now or at the end of this meeting. And we're going to further discuss them throughout this meeting. So I'll let my other fellow cohort peers talk about each standard.
And just a reminder, our social justice standards are identity, justice, action, and diversity. So we're going to move now into identity.
So our first cornerstone is identity, and the 5 standards shown below are the anchor standards. And the social justice framework, each grade level has its own development of these anchor standards, but the idea is generally the same. Identity is what makes a person who they are. It is the distinguishing character or personality of an individual. And these standards aim to work with students on what their identities may be, which groups in society they belong to, talking about historical and cultural knowledge and language to talk about each person's identity in a respectful manner. It also talks about multiple identities of each person. Each person is not just one thing. We're all made from all these wonderful, multiple little identities, and we want to be able to teach students how to celebrate that for themselves and for others with pride and confidence and bringing up their self-esteem. These anchor standards also aim to acknowledge the dominant culture in each space and to see how students negotiate their individual traits with how the dominant culture works in their community. So we will show you a little bit of how we used identity in the 5 lesson plans.
Okay, so here you can see how all of us incorporated identity within our lessons in different lenses. So starting with pre-K through 5th grade, hip hop, they used a personal portal. So students trace their feet on a piece of paper and draw pictures in it that represents them and their emotions. And they use it to jump into and dance to express their emotions. For 3rd through 5th grade, hula, students utilize age-appropriate, tangible ways to access identity with external and internal factors about themselves in which they focus on expressing identity through movement. 6th through 8th grade, Chinese ribbon dance. Students choose a color or multiple colors that they think best represents them, which is also their identity. And for 9th through 12th grade, flamenco, they work with it, Where I'm From poem. So here it might not necessarily be a literal representation of where they're actually from, but it could be. And then for the other high school, 9th through 12th grade, salsa, which is the unit or lessons that Laura and I worked on. So at the start of our first lesson, we thought it was important for students to connect with their peers through an identity activity. So here students have the opportunity to write on every student's Jamboard slide based on how they view them and what traits they see in every one of their peers. So at the end of this activity, students will navigate back to their own Jamboard slides to read all of the identity traits that their classmates wrote about them. And then they will pick 3 traits that they believe best represents them, and will utilize these 3 words for the rest of the lessons in salsa.
When we were creating our unit, something that was a little bit challenging for us was distinguishing what exactly is a personal identity and how what other people in the community may think about each person may affect each person's identity. And we also worked with what is the identity of a specific dance style. given that we asked students to merge their personal identity and the salsa identities to create an identity solo that spoke about who they were using vocabulary from the salsa unit.
Hi everyone. So our second anchor standard is diversity. In this anchor standard, a communal and respectful environment is fostered within the classroom. So a comfortable, encouraging, and motivational environment is provided for students to really thrive and push themselves towards their personal goals, in addition to the state and national learning goals. Some important key points are mentioned in these anchor standards are also highlighted on this slide. So through the implementation of diversity in instruction, students are guided through learning tasks that encourage comfortability, respect, support, open-mindedness, and others towards really learning how they can work with others despite their differences. So as you will see through all of the different lessons that we explain, a lot of our lessons use identity as a way to scaffold diversity. When students are more comfortable and confident in themselves and understand themselves on a personal level, we found that they are more inclined to prepare themselves to talk about themselves and recognize and accept others for their similarities and differences that are highlighted in this anchor standard. So looking at our first hip hop, we have highlighted some really important points in diversity through hip hop. I think this is my computer, hold on. Okay, it gives static sometimes, sorry. So in this younger unit for hip hop, diversity is addressed throughout the lessons during learning tasks through verbal discussions, drawings, and improvisational exercises. So through these learning activities, the students are really able to share and recognize their personal reactions to these different emotions and see how these different situations can make themselves react and how it may be different from other situations and other students' reactions, really building that empathy within the classroom towards other students.
In 3rd through 5th grade, which is hula, students engage in teamwork, building diversity through identifying with peers and community. And essentially, students work together to create identity hulas as a way to bring student identities together, highlighting both individual student identity and then the community, the identity of the community as a whole regarding hula. And this merging of identities helped facilitate diversity. Then there was 6th through 8th grade, which was Chinese ribbon dance, where students noticed different identities amongst the community. Some indicators in a dance movement class would be the choreographic choices that students made and how others might interpret those differences.
So looking at flamenco and salsa, they're kind of similar in a way that the students made their own individual pieces of work, like their own solos, and then they collaborated with other peers to express that diversity in the classroom by either different choreographic structures or ways to find that unison and the personal uniqueness in each. So looking a little more in depth at flamenco, Brianna, you wanted to start it off?
Yeah. Becky and I created the lesson Dancing Through the Lens of Flamenco and Spanish Culture. The unit plan is designed for students in grades 9 through 12. There are 3 elements in flamenco. There's the baile, which is the dancing, the cante, which is the singing, and the toque, which is the music. As Becky mentioned in an overview, students will produce a collaborative dance work inspired by their identities portrayed in the baile, toque, and cante. In taking a deeper look at diversity through their baile, students integrated the technique of flamenco and identity questions that we gave them in lesson 1 to create these baile phrases. And throughout the unit, students observe, critique, and uplift their peers' identities while creating diversity in the room.
So looking at the toque, which is the music element of flamenco, one really fun exercise that we did was an exit slip where we gave students a bass phrase of like body percussion that they all used, and then they would take that bass phrase and manipulate it to something that was resonating and personal for them.
And then what we had them do was their individual manipulated version and then ending off in that ensemble work. So there's highlighting both the similarities and differences in that diversity anchor standard. Similarly, in the Cante, which is the singing, we had the students make that Where I'm From poem that we talked about in identity. And this is how we kind of scaffold the identity to get to diversity. So they make these Where I'm From poems at home, and then they come in and they post them on an online platform, Padlet. And this platform kind of gives all students the accessibility to really read about others, their peers' identity and backgrounds and interests and whatever else they included in their poem. So we're really starting to welcome in that the differences and kind of respecting it and reading about and learning it, just maintaining that open-mindedness. And then we immediately move into a movement portion where students actually verbalize sections of their Where I'm From poem. So students can begin to hear each other's differences in the room while also finding, like, strengthening that identity as they use their movement to as like a stimulus.
And moving on into our justice anchor standards, we'll notice within the first two anchor standards, the word recognize and recognition. It's important that students recognize the stereotypes and unfairness on an individual level, and that we recognize the people, a person, for who they are. So bringing this into a context with dance, a few years ago in the media, we saw Prince George, the stereotypes, boys can't dance or boys can't do ballet. How do we have students recognize that stereotype of gender and dance as that's something Prince George enjoys doing? We see him as a person rather than a representation of a group of men or boys. And moving on to that discussion of recognizing the unfairness at an individual level, how do we notice these injustices at an institutional level, such as the classroom, such as the education field, as well as these microaggressions that could occur, as well as systematically, things that we can't control all the time because they've been passed down systematically. And then after we recognize, it's important that we analyze. We analyze how these harmful biases and the impacts of this, what does that have on our students as they navigate the education, their classrooms, as well as how they move into the world as the society in all the historical and today's context.
Great, thanks, Jill. So moving on to our next two anchor standards. So here students are really starting to engage with these ideas of power and privilege, starting to add more complexity to this idea of social justice and justice as itself. So students are taking these ideas of power and privilege on various levels, including interpersonal, intergroup, so thinking self as well as within their classroom, within their own communities that they're part of, and then on institutional level. So that could be school-wide or even larger, as Jillian mentioned, those systemic levels. Moving down to our next anchor standard, here students are really starting to learn about the history of social justice. So how has social justice been a part of the human experience for so many years? So talking about different figures, groups, and events that were really critical to the history of social justice and its development over time. We can jump onto our next slide here. We have our different lenses that we all use to incorporate justice into the dance classroom. So what does justice look like within dance? So we'll start off with our pre-K and second grade hip hop unit. This group used justice as an internal lens, so focusing on this idea of emotions and how is justice and injustice experienced internally, personally, whether that be in the classroom or on a larger scale. So calling on students to identify these injustices that they're experiencing, as well as identifying them in their peers' experiences as well. I'm going to skip over our hula unit because that's the unit that Jillian and I developed, and we'll jump over to the 6th and 8th grade Chinese ribbon dance unit. So another great lens to use for incorporating justice into your lessons is using current events, because students are keeping up with it, they're living it, they're experiencing it currently. So this group used the recent rise in AAPI activism and awareness, and this was used to promote discussion of justice and injustice as well, and kind of seeing that difference, how we can address these issues, how have they not been addressed in the past as well.
Moving on to high school. High school, we could add a little bit more context to justice. So you'll see with the high school salsa group, they called on students to work as a community. They created group pieces and they put on a performance for their community to show the different ways that they could create justice, that we could show justice and activism. And it's important that as students were working together, they were dissecting what justice is in order to create movement. Similarly, Flamenco also created by using their personal experiences. We thought students worked together to think about their own experiences with impressions, oppression, and injustices at this small microaggression level, as well as these big systematic levels that we discussed in the anchor standards.
Great, and now we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into our own units, which we focused on hula for 3rd to 5th grade. So the lens that we chose to use was history and context, because the history of hula is really rich with this idea and concept of injustice. So around the 1830s, hula was banned as Christian missionaries came to the island and kind of whitewashed, colonized the island. So for 40 years, hula was completely banned. The experiences, the culture and rich history of hula was taboo, kind of banned at that time. So using this idea of history and context for justice, students are introduced to this idea of injustice through this historical background. And from there, we take it into the students' own experiences, which I'll let Jillian dive into a little bit more.
Right, so as students learn about this history and how hula was exploited and all this different history of the injustices as well as justices that occurred in the history, they also are looking at themselves, taking this time to look inward, their own personal experiences, similar to the flamenco group, looking personal experiences about any injustices that they have either put onto others, taking that time to reflect. In order to be an ally, you have to admit when you're wrong, as well as thinking of their own types of injustices that have occurred to them. Through that framework, they're able to continue to create in order to think about these justices as well as injustice to move forward to being a citizen and a really thoughtful ally in the world. And moving on from justice, we have our last anchor standard of action.
Hi, everyone. So as teachers, we strive for our lessons to resonate with our students in a way that the knowledge that we explore with our students in the classroom is then practiced in the communities and everyday lives. So regarding the social justice standards, our mini units provided students to get a way to know about themselves, how they are similar and different from one another, and what positivity looks like for all. So action now is the how. We want to encourage our students to practice the knowledge and tools in society. So my cohort and I expanded these mini units that you all have been given to provide tools in which they can do so and they know how to do so. So engaging with our local school communities, our families, and practicing activities in the classroom are some ways we did so. So we want to encourage students to express empathy for one another, to recognize their own responsibility, to speak up with courage and respect, and then to make principled decisions about when and how to take a stand against bias and injustice, and then again, to plan and carry out collective action against bias and injustices. So Deja will now provide you a little insight in how we developed a plan in doing so for our students.
Hi, everyone. So like Abby touched on a little bit, although our unit plan towards identity, diversity, and justice, we developed expansion activities for these unit plans that teachers can utilize as a way for students to take their new knowledge and advocate for others as well as themselves. So starting off with our pre-K to 2nd grade hip hop unit that me and Abby developed, throughout the lessons within the unit, we teach the students how to express the emotions happy, sad, and mad through verbal discussions, drawing, creating movements, and embodying dynamic qualities within hip hop movements. By the end of the lessons, our hope is for students to learn how to express and manage their emotions in a safe and progressive way. So for the expanded version of our unit plan, we developed this circle activity in which students would be able to choose an emotion and create a movement to match that emotion, as well as an experience they've had relative to that emotion. And within the circle, students would chime in and provide how they would give that student support and positivity in experiencing those emotions. And then moving on to 3rd to 5th grade, the hula lesson, students would take what they learned from the hula lessons to work with members of the community as a means to spread awareness to the history and injustices within hula through both choreographed gestures and also verbally with one another. For 6th to 8th grade ribbon dance, within the lessons, the teachers introduced the current events regarding injustices within the AAPI community. So students would take that information that they've learned about those current events and choreograph a dance that would ultimately spread awareness to specific issues that they've discussed. And then for 9th to 12th grade flamenco, students would work with members of the community to share their own personal stories regarding injustice and other things with one another. And then they would work with these members of the community to create a project on said injustices as a means to spread awareness. And then lastly, we have 9th to 12th grade salsa. And for this lesson, at the end of the lesson, students would be having a potluck in which they would all be bringing in foods of their own culture to share with one another as a way to celebrate each other. But within the potluck, they would all be advocating for themselves as they would be taking different roles in organizing the potluck. So for example, one student might be in charge of creating the list of what everyone will be contributing to the potluck. And then another student might be creating a list of what family members, et cetera, would be invited to the potluck as well.
Great. So after getting a taste of the 5 different unit plans and how we all were able to embed these 4 cornerstones of identity, justice, action, and what was the second one? I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting right now. Identity,
Diversity.
And diversity, thank you. We will continue with the theme of action by challenging all of you in your teaching, no matter which dance environment you are in, through this call of action. So as part of continuing our education as teachers and artists, it's our responsibility to stay informed, right? Because a lot of new resources are coming out, arising, surrounding our areas of teaching. And in order to be advocates as well as allies for our students in our communities, we need to take action for ourselves and spread resources to our colleagues about new information that's arising in the world, socially, politically, culturally, and historically, as well as in the dance world.
Here we have attached a recent article that addresses our assumptions with dance forms being labeled as non-Westernized that are not. So Sarah's going to share this link in the chat with you all, so you can leave with a little bit of information to think about, as we did ourselves. One of our last class, we took a look at this. And now we're gonna open up the floor to some questions and answers. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see each other's faces. It's been a while. Okay. All right, so if there's any questions at this time, feel free to raise your hand and unmute yourself. And if you have a specific question for a group, just let us know and we will guide you to them. Let's see. If there are no questions at this time, I will like to take a moment to thank Dance New Jersey for allowing us to have this opportunity to share our units. And I also would like to thank Frederick Curry for facilitating this partnership, as well as our instructors, Becky and Emily, for mentoring us and helping us structure these units. And we can't forget Christina Marte, because she built us up to this moment last semester, and we just are very thankful for all of you. And yeah, thank you. Yes, Heather.
Hey, I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say that this was great and commend Rutgers for just having a course like this. And I'm excited to see a lot of new teachers coming out into the dance ed world with this information. I run a program in Jersey City. I'm actually celebrating my 20th year, and thank you. I'm gonna just go ahead and brag because it's been 20 years, I think. But you may know Jersey City is the most diverse city in the country, and so just inevitably, like I had to address a lot of these things from day one. And so I just thought I'd share just a little bit about just like just some of my experiences. Like again, I'm so glad to see that this kind of a course is being integrated, and I do see shifts happening in the dance world finally. But I've been teaching with a lot of these values the whole time, and I've had a lot of like had to defend what I was doing a lot. So I just want to say to you, just like stand by it, because I've shown work and had people say things like, well, they're point their feet more, and I'm kind of like, it's kind of not at all what we're trying to do here. So and even talk about the training that I was giving as well, that's more enrichment, which I processed as it's enrichment because it's not ballet or modern or the westernized forms, and cultural forms were called enrichment. And so there was a whole period where I had to like defend that. So I think you will have an easier time, but if you don't, just like stand by it, because it's changing and it's happening, and I'm happy to see your work. And also, if I could just do a shameless plug, only because it's relevant, my students' show is tomorrow and Friday online, and we actually it's very justice oriented. They've made pieces about privilege, about relationships with police, about assimilation, and so if you're interested in seeing like how some of this manifests with teenagers, I'll share the link there, and I would love for any of you to check it out. So thanks again, and congratulations to everybody.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Frederick.
I'm just wondering did you have any conversations around appreciation in the development of your lesson plans? And how did you engage with those? How did you find a way to engage with those dance cultures that maybe you weren't a part of, that you weren't born into?
Jill, I saw your hand raised. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can take this. Kara and I did hula for 3rd to 5th grade, and that was a conversation we had frequently since we weren't a part of that culture. How much is appreciation, and where are we stepping over this line of appropriation? Because when you looked online, there's Hollywood hula, and then there's hula of the Hawaiian people. So one way we did was tons of research, as well as ask people from that community. One really simple thing we thought was, is showing Lilo and Stitch and Pikachu in a grass skirt, would that be appropriate in the culture? And we were confirmed, like, no, that's appreciation. It's a way to engage. But we really did have to take that step by step, even though it was things that could be considered microscopic, and really analyze our choices to make sure that we are appreciating hula throughout our entirety of our unit. If anyone else has anything to add, Kara, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll jump into just to kind of reemphasize what Jill has added. I think the biggest thing for us when we were first approaching this project is we wanted to make sure that our lessons were founded in research and accurate information. And a really big part of that for us was getting to speak with a hula instructor. And she offered us lots of guidance on kind of different techniques within the movement itself. And in our unit as well, we included information on Hawaiian culture and the history of hula as well. So helping us to make sure everything's accurate and just making sure we can present the best information possible for our students.
And just quickly adding to that, I believe that a conversation that we had as a cohort was not only about how do we make sure that we're appreciating and not appropriating, but also because none of us were trained not classically, but like formally trained in any of these dance styles. We didn't want the fact that we hadn't received the training mean that then our students wouldn't receive the training. So part of opening these doors to underrepresented dance styles, and the reason why we wanted to do so much research was because we wanted to make sure that we taught ourselves the background, the history, as well as the steps and the technique of each style in order to give the students the best knowledge they could gain from each style, even though we never received formal training. And it was important for us to represent each style and being very respectful about what it meant, the background it came from, and all of the unspoken things that it comes with a dance style. And it is representing people's culture. So it was important for us to do the research in both lenses, both as the background, but also in the technique itself and how to embody it.
Okay. Good. So in the example of the Lilo, I find this fascinating. So in the example of the Lilo and Stitch appreciation appropriation debate, what's an example of appropriation? Like what would have crossed the line?
So what would have the answer to that question would be that we found that appropriation of hula historically is Hollywood's representation of hula in the 1950s and 60s. The sexualization of women that you'll see in cartoons isn't the representation because that exploits the hula culture. So that's really the line in the sand that we discovered through our research and through talking with that expert. But it also has really opened my eyes that when you see those things, what do you do? What do you say? How do you combat those stereotypes? Going back to that justice standard and anchor, it's not just something you do in your lessons, it's something you implement in your day-to-day life to be an educator and a citizen. So I think when we think about where's that line in the sand of appropriating versus appreciation, I think it's important to continue challenging ourselves.
And I do want to add too as well, something that Jillian and I wanted to prioritize as well. These kind of representations of hula, so Lilo and Stitch, or like Jillian mentioned, like a little image of Pikachu with a grass skirt on, were kind of ways for us to help this age group kind of have an in to hula and kind of pique their interest with it, but then also incorporating accurate images. So images from hula schools or from performances, competitions that show actual hula dancers who train rigorously in this style, so they can see kind of that additional information, but really the accurate information as well.
I know the question was about hula, but that made me think about something else. So Christina and I, something that we added at the very, very end of our unit is we just compiled a list of Cuban foods in New Jersey, which was the simplest thing. And it's not Cuban foods. I said Cuban foods, didn't I? Cuban restaurants.
in New Jersey, which was the simplest thing, and it has nothing to do with dance, but the idea was, okay, we've piqued your interest here with salsa. We've shown you a little bit about this culture, but Cuban culture is so much more than just salsa. So we want you to kind of grab this little treat that's piquing your interest, like Kara was saying, and then dive deeper into the culture so that then you can really become a citizen of the world and you get to know everyone else. And then part of celebrating diversity is knowledge. It's knowing what other cultures bring to the table, and then how can you incorporate that in the rest of your life, like where you eat, and knowing a little bit more about the background again of where these dances come from.
Hi everyone, can I ask a question? Is that okay? All right, hi Laura. I have kind of a difficult question. What sort of strategies or ideas did you come up with for the potential for pushback or confusion or stereotypes coming up from the children? I know, I'll give a really blatant example. I was teaching a lesson in the Bronx, and I was in charge of teaching a college readiness lesson to 7th graders, very relevant when you're 12. And I was showing them a vlog of a day in the life of a college student, and that college student happened to be Asian. And some of the students had so many thoughts about what this person was eating. And I, kind of on the spot came up with some ways to sort of talk about it, but I felt like I really wasn't prepared because a lot of times students come to our classes with stereotypes from home, and you don't want to insult or question a child's upbringing, but you want to create an inclusive and respectful environment. So I guess I'm just wondering if that was something that you came up with. I mean, we have these like grounding conversations about safe spaces and all that, but I think sometimes kids don't make the connection between that and these comments that they sort of make off the cuff. So just wondering if anyone had any thoughts about that and how this was something that was possibly integrated into your lesson plan.
I'll take this. I think while it wasn't like specifically integrated into our lesson plan, what we did integrate were the anchor standards of social justice. And I think when those conversations are brought up, it's a really great segue into the heavier topics of identity and diversity and recognizing others' differences. And instead of looking at it as like a negative, to look at it as a positive and be like, how cool is that this student is eating this? What do you eat? What do you bring to school? And just kind of to change that conversation around so it ends positively. Yeah.
To add on to what Claudia was saying, I took a course that I don't remember the lens of pedagogy that it is, but it was basically combating those stereotypes that students bring into the classroom. And one way that I admired that this teacher did in the example was have students identify what those stereotypes are. I think that subconsciously we have an idea of stereotypes that we've heard in passing about varying races, varying ethnicities, and even there are some that we don't know. But having students identify it and asking the question, where did you learn that, or where did you hear that from? Because it helps the educator get an idea of where those stereotypes are being brought in, similarly to how you said that it's in the usually in the home that students bring it in, but having a way to combat it, discuss it, combat it, and find ways to, as Claudia was saying, change the way that we view it and acknowledge that it is a stereotype. It's not necessarily true. It's something that has been created. Maybe have an idea of where that comes from, because there's likely history that's linked to it, and shift that perspective.
So, graduates, is it okay if I begin a wrap up? Is that okay with everyone? Any other additional questions? Graduates, please tell us where you're going, what you're doing, what's happening, and how we can support you over the summer before you hit the ground running in the fall. Heather's email address is in the chat, so you're going to take it right now. But we'd love to hear from you about what's happening. Anybody? Anybody got a gig? Yay, Jill does.
No, I was just going to speak on our behalf, saying that we are all in the applying stages, hopeful for a job, full-time dance job role in the fall. If anything, here's something, please contact us.
So Dance New Jersey is sometimes informed from a district, and we'll put it on our member connection page, and also send it however we best can. Set your Google alert for dance jobs, right? So that you're being alerted, and begin or remain connected, right? Remain connected as best you can. Christina, I feel like something's coming. No, she's just excited for you. Okay, she's excited for you. What a year to graduate. So there's that. Right.
Oh, I had one last question real quick. Sorry if this wasn't clear. So were these lesson and unit plans that were actually implemented, or was this like a project that was replacing the normal Kinetic Connections coursework, like as in terms of like going into elementary school after school programs?
I'll say something. So because we were remote, we didn't have the opportunity to be one-on-one with students, either virtually or in person, but we created these lessons so that all of you and everybody could use these lessons as a way to incorporate that. But we also created videos where you could even press the play button and it would be us teaching the lesson for you. But I think I'm right in saying that somebody that we just spoke to yesterday used one of our lessons, right, Christina, Laura?
Yeah, one of the post-bac students at Rutgers already used one of our lessons from Salsa. So.
Yes, and I've gotten sporadic feedback that there's been people using the lessons and implementing them. So, and it's been all positive feedback.
Dance New Jersey has a couple of announcements. We are hosting, yes, bravo, graduates. And thank you. It's not just thank you, wow, what a great resource. It's to echo what Heather said. You're doing this work and you're starting out at this space, headspace level, all these things. It's really tremendous for the state of New Jersey. Just the state. This is this. Here we are, right? So congratulations. Dance New Jersey. Show Up and Dance, Dancing Outside 2021 is a virtual showcase of member organizations and individual submissions from members. It is kind of taking the place of Show Up and Dance on the Beach, which is an annual event of Dance New Jersey. Hopefully next year we're back on the beach. So it is work that is recorded outside, made outside, celebrates the great outdoors, and it is made in 2021. Kelly is going to put the link in the chat for that. It's through our website, and we'll take you to a form for that. Any other announcements? I don't think so. Okay. Good luck. You're the best, all of you. All right, thank you. Feel free to put your email in the chat if you would like to connect. Grab emails from the chat. Make sure you have the link. And thank you. And can I give a little shout out to the baby that's right there? We all see this, right? This is so exciting. There's a baby. She doesn't want to show us. Oh, look. Everybody wants to see a baby. That's baby Blake.
Sorry, we just moved yesterday, so things are a little messy, but
Yay.
if anyone wants to babysit, come to Jersey. And then we can talk about your dance teaching job, you know?
Yeah.
Listen,
we can
they all,
write curriculum and you can babysit.
they all know I got them first.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. Feel free to stay and grab information from the chat. Thank you.
Meg.
Thanks.
Thank you.